Okay, so down to the valves and how they're arranged for different channels inside this amplifier. So on channel 1 you have a singular valve, commonly referred to as the clean channel, and pretty much it is. This one is a new old stock. There'll be a picture of that. Quite how you pronounce that name I don't know. New old stock basically means a valve that was manufactured some time ago, but has only recently come into circulation, purchased. These though, I think, the valve amp they were originally in was a Mesa Boogie Mark IIB, which is 1982. Whether or not these would have been current stock then and these are the valves that were just in there, don't know. But they are an older valve. The company that they're branded by doesn't exist anymore, that's for sure. For channel 2 you have two valves working in tandem, I've marked here. So valve 1 and valve 2, furthest out one there, and both of these again are the we'll call them NOS valves. Channel 3 is a little more unusual in that you've got one of the valves from the channel 2 pairing and also 3 additional valves working together. Quite how they're wired, whether it's a case of a straight cascade or whether it's a case of 2 pairs working together, I'm not entirely sure, but there are 4 in there and there is bags again on that channel. Okay, these are a bit of a mixed bag. I've got one NOS in channel 2 part of the configuration, a second NOS valve in the second position, and then 2 original Marshall branded valves in channel 3. The next remaining preamp valve is this one here, which is the phase splitter. So this is the last sort of preamp valve, if you like, that your guitar signal is being fed through before it hits the power amp section of the amplifier. When I first got this one was very noisy, and it seemed to be compressing the saturation quite a bit. Wasn't 100% happy with it, so that was replaced with this one, which is quite a recent valve. It's a TAD, picture to follow, and that took away some of that compression. There are other valves you can put in there. I think there's the AT 12AX7 AT, and that has a lower percentage of gain than a standard 12AX7. Again, personal preference for me. I don't like that extra compression throwing in. Okay, the power amp section. These are Svetlana winged EL34s, and they work in 2 pairs in 100 watt mode. So you've got these 2, as I've marked here, working in a pair, and then these 2 also working in a pair. Bear in mind, when you switch this amp and a lot of other amps with 4 power amp tubes down to 50 watt mode, you're only using 2 of them. I'm not entirely sure if it's the outer 2 or the inner 2 pair that are working in the 50 watt mode, but what happens is they're driven harder and also they'll wear out a lot faster than the 2 that aren't, so be aware of that as you're using it. As you can see over here, the 2 stage transformers are massive and they're also very, very heavy. Okay, so that's the quick overview of the valves and the ones that I've put in here. The reasons behind them: I just like the lack of compression and the way certain harmonics were sort of lifted by the NOS valves over brand new Mesa Boogie ones, the Marshalls I had, some various others, Electro Voice, and various other brands. These just sounded the sweetest, and the way I checked it was I had the amp like this. I didn't know which valve I was picking up next, didn't look at it, just located it in the slot, switched the amp back on. Obviously you switch it off when you swap valves, and just listened. And I then recorded 4 different valves in section 1 and listened back to the recordings. I didn't know which one belonged to which until I checked the names of those recordings, and it ended up being this one, and repeated the process for all the others till I was quite happy with them. At this time I had the channel EQ just 12 o'clock on everything, just to give a sort of blind test for myself. Okay, so that's the valves that I'm using and that I think are pretty cool. and certainly give the tone that I'm happy with. And at the end of the day, it's my amp, it's me playing it, so truly it should be me that's happy with it. Okay, so that's this section. For this section, we'll look at the back panel. I'm going to breeze through this pretty quickly, so bear with me. Okay, all important, speaker outputs, whatever you do, never switch the damn thing on unless there's an appropriate speaker load attached to the amp. Okay, two modes of operation, so we've got pentode and triode. That is quite difficult to sort of verbalise quite what that does. It gives the amp a different character. It's much more mushy, I find, in triode mode. Pentode is sort of working at full pelt. Triode is sort of working at half that, but it does give a different quality to the sound. In recording situations, try everything, you know, but someone once described it on a forum somewhere as triode is me drunk and pentode is me sober. That's as good as any kind of description I've heard. Okay, moving on. You've then got impedance selection. This is quite important also. So you can switch from 8 ohms, which is one single 8 ohm speaker, or various other combinations of that. For Ohm's law, Google that, look it up, memorize it. It's important, especially with amps like these. So you can switch between 8 and 16, or brackets 16.4. So when you're running this with two 8 ohms, one 8 ohm connected to each speaker output, it should be in 4 ohm mode. Okay, after that you've got your various fuses, which are covered in the manual, what they're working. You've then got direct out, balanced compensating. This is one of the best DI outs I've ever heard from an amp of this era. There's new amps out there now with digital speaker modelling built in, and yes, they're great. The recordings you're hearing of this are done two ways. Either they're done from a mic straight in front of the speaker on all my videos, or I use what's called a speaker emulation box by Palmer, who are sort of the best there is at making this sort of stuff. And the reason for that is, when you take the DI out from this amp, what you're not getting is the interaction with the power amp stage. So it is missing something when you do it. It's not unpleasant, it is a good sound. It's very focused, like a direct signal from an SM57 mic. It's very usable, certainly in live situations. But I think the Palmer just does a slightly better job than it should do. That's all it can do. And that sits on the speaker output and nowhere else. Okay, you've then got your power setting. Again, this is the one that turns off either pairing of these valves, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think low power is the inner two, and all four is when you switch to full power. I run it at full power, so I'm getting equal wear on the power amp stage valves. They are the expensive ones, and the second reason, of course, is I just like it that way. I like the way that sounds. It has a feature called damping select, and this has to do with how much the movement of the speaker is impeded. When you're on a clean sort of channel, you don't want too much of that because you will lose headroom. It may give you a desirable sort of sound, but personally I just leave it on auto, because what the amp does is, as soon as you're at a higher volume, or the power amp stage is being driven, it basically switches it off. Okay, so moving on again, we've got the send and return section. Now you've got more than your usual amount of options here. With the send and return on this amp, you can switch between a serial loop and a parallel loop, and this is quite important. Some effects units sound terrible on parallel loops, and the reason for it is, and it was explained on a TC Electronics video when they first brought out the G system, what happens is, fast as the processing is in the top end multi-FX units, signal passing through it and out of it doesn't happen as quickly as it does going down a straight piece of cable. So if the dry signal is also being processed and fed back, what you will get is what they call phase cancellation between the original signal and the wet signal. So if you can turn off the dry portion of the effects send there on your effects unit, and parallel will sound best, because you've got a completely authentic as it was signal plus an affected signal blended together, and for delays and choruses that's great. But you can switch between them with this button here. Now then, when I use it with the Nova, I have it set in series mode, because the Nova system you can't switch off the dry signal. Bloody annoying. They should put that on it. You've also got a loop level control. Now the normal way you would set this up according to the manual is go to channel 3, select your top volume and set the input and output settings of your effects unit from that, and then balance in that with these two trim pots here. Now that's correct and it's the way to do it, but you can also switch this out and all three will be going through exactly as they are on the dial on the front with the volume. After a lot of mucking about, I got this to work nicely and sit long, so that's always in for me. You've then got MIDI control. That's never actually been tested on this particular amp. I've never come to a point where I feel I need to use it. And then the foot switch, which you can see has a centre pin and then 5 outer pins in a certain arrangements, which means yes, you are stuck with their particular foot switch for this. It's not just a generic one, unfortunately. But you can switch channels with MIDI if you know what you're doing with MIDI. Okay, I think that covers everything on there. So there's not much else to talk about on the back. We'll leave it there. So there's an internal shot of the actual amplifier itself. As you can see, there's quite a lot happening in there for a Marshall. You got your power amp tubes connected under here. You can see by the biasing resistors there, high quality stuff. It's very clean and tidy actually. I've literally never cleaned this. All I've ever done is put a bit of this magic stuff, which I recommend for cleaning out potentiometers. There we go. Servicol. Super 10. It's great for guitar pots, any kind of volume pots, etc. And the cleaning holes are just at the top here. It's a pig getting to the clean channel ones because they're underneath this panel, but you can remove this, but it's a lot of time to do it, to be honest with you, because you've got so many other bits and bobs. A lot of the stuff in here is slightly borrowed. I don't know if you can make out there, but just here on top of this plug it says Sony. So, you know, at some point this ribbon cable here that feeds whatever was in a Sony factory. The caps I think are all pretty much original, slightly swollen, but I don't think they're ready for a change yet. And none of the valves have ever really blown in any big sort of way either, which is nice to know. But there's the internal gubbins of the amp, and I'll just do a quick shot of the inspection panel on the side. Okay, so here's the inspection label. As you can see, we've got Squiggle assembled it. Looks like Lamb, I think, wired it, then tested by Jim. That is extremely unlikely to be Jim Marshall. In '92 I don't think he went near the factory floor. And then the date, which is written in the correct or UK version, so we put days, then months, then years, you know, so they're sort of stacked in some kind of size sequence. So 15th of the 6th, so 15th of June '92 is when this left the or when it was tested, and then it was inspected by Squiggle. I don't know whose signature that is. And then here we've got 6101, which is what the amp is, and STD standard, so not an LM model or any of the more sort of rare special ones. I think there was only 800 in the full head size LMs with the brass, but there we go, that's what's on the inspection label. Okay, this is the speaker that's come supplied with these in the UK. It's a specialist one made by Celestion, as you can see. I've never seen anything else quite like this one. It is unusual in of itself, and it has what I would describe as, it's kind of like a VC30, but a bit thicker, a bit more punchy to my ears. Speaker choice will make a drastic difference to the sound of your amplifier also. The US models didn't have these, they had a different type of speaker altogether, an EV one I believe. But yeah, I mean, that is massive. Look at the size of the speaker on that. Now I've got quite reasonably big hands, and it covers those, you know, completely. That's a fair size speaker. And then this rubber bit here, I've never tried to sort of remove that in any way. I would hate to try and take it off and then realise I shouldn't have done, but I might do, just for this vid. So yeah, it's going to come off pretty easy. And that's it, you see. Nothing very interesting to look at there. So that's the massive thing it's held on with. Someone's been in there before by the look of it, looking at all those fingerprints. But yeah, there we go. So I will pop that back. On there. Okay, so this is the extension speaker that it came with. You see I've taken the back off here, and if I just flip this around, you see they're sealed back. Hello dog. And the same Celestion, although a lot cleaner, in here with the same large rubber dust cover, and then these kind of pretty wimpy wires really. Might replace those, but hey. Yeah, so two 3.5 inch base ports on there, all made out of, I think that's MDF, you know, looks like MDF, and then ply all the way around. I can see here. Nice.